The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
And my sidekick, our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. We are going to be talking about getting down with minis, as in grooming, or playing beauty school dropout. Meredith?
And all the training.
Yes. What have you learned about this?
Well, I started out in my career as a kid with ponies. And I found that kind of funny because the parents were buying ponies for their kids, and the only thing that they used as a determining factor was the size. But I soon learned how torturous ponies can be. I mean, they don't cooperate with hardly anything. They run away with you, they kick you, they bite you. You know, they throw you on the ground and all this kind of stuff.
All right.
But when you're a kid, you're really resilient. And then the parents don't ever really see it.
Right.
You know, because they go, oh, here's your pony, go up and ride your pony. You know, and you come in and you go, golly, you look all roughed up. And you go, you know, and nobody ever asks what happened to you. You're going to be dirty out there anyway, you know. They just think you made the mistakes. But it isn't really that way. Those little punks are really mean. I have spent my career, because I was worried about the credibility of my training program, I thought, well, I got to try the way I train, the way I feed, and the way I manage these guys on all different sizes, all different breeds, and see if this works all the way down the line with all of them. And it does. After 50 years of research, you know, in the field, actually practicing these things on real animals through this whole time, I have found that the only difference in feeding, for instance, is the amount that you give them. I still feed everybody their crimped oats mix with show glow vitamins and Mazola corn oil because it has the same effect on all equines. It gets the nutrients into their system. It gives them the oats that they love most of all. And the Mazola corn oil takes care of their hooves, their coats, and their digestive tract regularity and minimizes colic and everything. And like I said, you know, it just depends on how big they are as to how much they're going to get.
Okay.
Drafts usually get, we recommend 1.5 cups to 2 cups of oats in the mix and 1 ounce of Mazola corn oil and 1 ounce of show glow in the mix, and we feed it at night. The miniatures will get 1/4 of that. The standards that are in between might get 1/2 of that. And the drafts get twice that because they're so big.
Okay.
So it's a simple thing, and it's really economical because if you've got a lot of animals that are a lot of different sizes, then, you know, you don't have to go out and buy different feeds for them. You just get the same thing for everybody and just do it according to size. The management thing is the same. You want to keep them in a dry lot and go ahead and feed them in there, let them spend most of their time in there during the day. You want to have turnout. It's always good to have a dirt pen that's a little bit bigger than where they're standing around in the stall and run, so that when they have grazing time in the spring, that's only like an hour for a couple of weeks, then 2 hours for a couple of weeks, they still have a place where you can group them together where they can play so they don't get bored. And now this has become very important when it comes to minis, because minis, they need something to do all the time. And so
They're busy little guys.
They are very busy little guys. And the other thing is they are prone to vices. They're more apt to kick you. They're more apt to bite you and whirl around and play and bump into you and do all these crazy things. They're little guys with Napoleon complexes, is what I say. They're littler than everybody else, so they have to act bigger. And from there comes all kinds of, behaviors that are a little questionable. That's why the minis, too, are very prone to obesity. So that's why they need a larger dirt pen to group together and play together and keep themselves busy with their group of friends, you see. And I don't typically turn my minis out on grass or my donkeys at all.
That is the correct answer.
I just put them into bigger turnout pens during the day so they can play and not establish any real vices. The other thing that I do is I've made my facility actually cribbing proof, because a lot of these horses and everything, they've developed things like cribbing collars and all of that and hot wires. But I tell you what, mules and donkeys are smart enough to just put out a hot wire. You can't depend on a hot wire to keep them honest.
Oh, wow.
So I just go ahead, and the fencing that I have here around the barns, it's steel panels. The barn is made of steel. It's a porta-stall barn. The walls are all lined with steel. Even on the barns that we built out of wood, anywhere they can reach, it's got steel plate on it. Then I ran into the bigger pens, and of course you can't do panels around the bigger pens. So what I did was I went to vinyl fencing with a hot wire on it, and that tended to work really well. Of course, in the beginning, I didn't have the hot wire on it, and the mules took all the rails out and laid them on the ground. But I gotta say, the mules are very careful about that kind of thing. They just thought I gave them some tinker toys to play with.
Oh boy, toys!
And they didn't leave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they did that. But here lately, we've had cattle on the north fence. And they're not so nice about those rails. They have barbed wire fence with a barbed wire on the other side of it, but they go underneath that wire and they bend it and everything, and then they hit my vinyl fence, and they're just breaking those rails and throwing them into my pasture. And then, of course, we got to buy new rails, and they're $45 a piece, and they're doing it all year long. And I thought, we got to do something about this. So we just finished building a steel pipe rail fence, four rails high, and the posts are sunk in concrete. And I think we've got this problem licked now, and we don't expect to have any maintenance costs on that fence anymore. So if you've got cattle on the other side, you might think about doing an alternative. The first thing that happened was when I first did the panels, for instance, on the property line on the south end of my property, they had cattle, and they had this huge bull. And this bull was breaking through my vinyl fencing, and I would find him in my barnyard. He was huge. I walk out there, here's this bull staring at me. So we did put panels around that because we were building the barn and we had a lot of panels, so we just ordered more. That fencing between me and my neighbor to the south was not that extensive. It was maybe a quarter mile. The one we just did in the steel pipe was a half a mile or more. Panels, it wasn't economically feasible to do that on the north side. But it's worked for years now on the south side. It's kept all those cattle out, which is a really good thing. And here in Colorado, you can complain all you want, but the rules are that it's still open range.
I never shot nobody. I didn't have.
So you have to fence them out. The neighbors that own the cattle don't have to fence them in.
Okay.
Oh, and we get phone calls all the time, that my cattle are on the road, and I have to tell them those are not my cattle, first of all. They've been there for years, so just ignore them. They'll go home when they're darn ready. You live with it, what can I say? But in doing all of this, we have determined what kind of maintenance we have to have, and even the minis pose a different solution for the fencing problem as well, because the minis can knock the vinyl rails out and crawl right through if there's too much space between those rails. In the pens where we're going to have the minis, we had to put extra plastic rails in, so it's almost a solid wall where they are, with about 1.5 inches between boards, because otherwise they'll get out. You know, they're very clever that way. And so that's one consideration with the minis. The other consideration is that you need to remember that these guys are so small that it's difficult for them to make eye contact with us. And the eyes are the window to the soul. So it's kind of understandable that they would get anxious and kind of uncomfortable when they can't look you in the eyes. So they're always on the defensive. Like I said earlier, they're kind of little guys with Napoleon complexes. So they're going to get you before you get them. Is how they look at it. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And it kind of makes sense. And if you're getting into training, this is what I found to be true. No matter what sized animal, no matter what breed, I had to figure out how they saw me. And I had to put myself in a good light and learn to negotiate with them rather than trying to force them to do anything.
That is the correct answer.
In the initial introductions, and it's particularly important with minis, you have to make that eye contact with them. Horse trainers tell you to do exactly the opposite. You start in a round pen, you don't think about their physical development, and you chase them around in the round pen, and then when you feel like they're paying attention to you, you turn around and turn your back to them, and you wait for them to come to you.
Right.
Well, if you chase a mini around like that, now even a mule doesn't take kindly to that.
Right.
Because they're half horse, they'll kind of half horse respond.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now the horse is what they've practiced on, and that's what comes to them in the middle of the pen, but they're very submissive and they're kind of resentful about it.
Sure.
You know? And I developed my program with the idea that I wanted to pay more attention to the way I'm developing their bodies to be prepared for the things that I'm going to ask them later. That's how I approached all my saddle mules, is to get them ready for riding. And that's why all the attention to core strength. But just because you're smaller doesn't mean that you don't need core strength, because we ask our minis to do all kinds of different things too. The most common thing is driving, and if they're going to be driving and pulling carts and wagons with our little bodies in them, we're asking them to pull something pretty heavy. If we lead them in a trail class, for instance, and they've got to go up and down and around all these obstacles, if they're not going to mess up their muscle systems and their skeletons and not get sore, they need to be prepped for that too. And especially if there's jumping involved. And they even have coon jumping classes for miniature mules at Bishop. They're doing athletic things, so it makes sense that just because they're small doesn't mean that they don't need preparation for athletic activities. They actually do. And a lot of people, because they're so little and they're so cute, think that they're pets. And nothing could be further from the truth. You don't know what you've got on the end of that lead rope. When you go out to do something.
Little hellions.
Yes. You know, and little horses can be really, really evasive, and they can really defend themselves quite well. The worst case in all of that is an intelligent little horse like a mule.
Right.
And the ones I've found that are a little bit better to work with, a lot calmer because they're thinking animals, are the miniature donkeys. You know, if you get a miniature donkey as a really young or a baby, and at least 6 months old, because they should not be weaned not any equine should be weaned from their mother before 6 months old.
Okay.
There's a lot they have to learn from their mom, and you can't teach them. And when you interfere with a foal and its dam, you can cause all kinds of problems. You know, if the dam smells you on the baby, she might actually reject her foal. So when you're in there waiting for them to be born and you're thinking imprinting, think about taking your time and letting that mother get to her foal first and do all the licking and everything that she wants to do, and getting that foal to nurse first before you step in. Timing is everything with these guys. So I've known a lot of orphan foals that didn't have to be orphan foals, in other words.
Oh.
So you want to keep those kinds of things in mind. And the other thing is, because you want to keep those foals with their mom until they're really established in nursing, then that means mom has to be safe too. So if you're working with a mini, for instance, you better darn well do all the training on the mom, so that when you go to approach her after she's had her foal, that you're kind of a step ahead on the training end of things. And that way it'll make it a whole lot easier. And you begin your training by being very conscious about making eye contact with them. If it's safe to do so, get down on your knees and get down to their level with mom, with the miniature. If you don't have one with mom, if he's weaned already, just get down on their level and coax them over. By 6 months, you know, they're going to be coaxed by the oats and they'll want it. Before that, you just get down on your knees and you just want to do the imprinting stuff and just get them to where they'll let you touch them. Just make sure you don't make mom mad. She should be able to come over with the mini, you know, if she's got her baby with her.
Okay.
She should be able to come to you with her baby, and the baby will probably hide behind the mother. Don't be pushy about it. When she's ready to let you touch her foal, she'll let you know. You know, just keep it a negotiation and a forceful thing. We always want to go in, put the halter, tie the mother, put the halter on, tie the mother up, then get the halter on the baby right away so he can get used to it. I guarantee you that those babies, when they're even 6 months old, are going to get used to that halter just fine. And now we'll talk about when they are 6 months old and they've been weaned and they're by themselves. They don't need to get used to the halter. They need to get used to you.
Well,
If they get used to you, then putting the halter on is going to be easy. Go ahead and start by getting down to their level, which they should be used to if you've done it, if you've had their mom and them together. If you haven't, they are eating oats by now. You want to go ahead and offer the oats from the fanny pack you have around your waist. When they're in the stall eating hay, you go to the door. You don't go to the feeder and impose yourself, because we've established that their stall and run is their safe place. That's where we don't interfere with them. We don't go in there and sit in the middle of their pen. We don't put obstacles in the middle of their pen. That's not a training place. It's a safe space for them.
okay.
And if they want to share it with you, they'll invite you in. But first you got to get them to come to you and accept you. And when they do, then you'll be able to be invited in for leading lessons, but not until after they have accepted you putting the halter on them. And that starts at the door. That starts with you getting them to come to you for oats. That comes from them accepting your touch, and you start on their neck, not on their face. Especially minis don't like you touching around their face right away. After they accept you touching the front part of their body, then you can start thinking about rubbing them on the forehead and working your way down the cheek. You don't impose yourself on them. They don't like that, and they'll run off. They'll just go away. But what I like to do is when they're in the pen, I'll have them come over and get the oats from me. But when I see that they're pretty calm about it and they're coming to the door regularly, that's like an invitation to come into the pen and start dealing with them that way. I will go ahead and go into the pen and sit down on the ground. I keep pea gravel on the ground of the pens, 4 inches of it, so it drains well. It doesn't get muddy in spots, and so when I sit on the ground, I don't get that dirty. And I don't get wet.
All right.
There are things to consider, And this is why I do these things. The pea gravel also keeps their ground dry. It makes for healthy hooves because the hooves aren't standing in mud all the time and getting soft. And the round pebbles of the pea gravel will not chip their feet, yet it's hard enough ground. Hooves, in order to stay hard, need concussion, regular concussion, and it will give them that too. And yet, when they want to lay down in the pea gravel, if you keep 4 inches of it on there, 3-4 inches, it's soft enough so that when they lay down in it, it doesn't rub sores on their body either.
Okay.
So you go ahead with the idea and go into their pen. You don't have the halter at first. You just want to have a conversation with them. And I call having picnics with them. I keep them all together in a pen at once. I've got my fanny pack around my waist, and I start out with having picnics in them in an open dirt pen area. And I just sit down and wait for them to come to me. And from that position, I can do a lot. They know I have the fanny pack full of oats because they come to the door for it. And so when I'm sitting there in the middle of the pen, they tend to come over. They see I've got the fanny pack, and they'll come over, and then I give them a few oats out of my hand for coming over. Then I start rubbing their necks and their faces, and they like that, so then they get rewarded for standing there for that. I'm usually wearing a ball cap when I go in there, so then I tell them, oh, wouldn't you look cute in this ball cap? And whoever's being the boldest, and most of the time I had 2 or 3, I would go ahead and take my ball cap and put it on them. And I would give them oats for wearing the ball cap. And then I would have my person come over with a camera and take pictures of us with them in the ball cap. And I would talk to them, oh, isn't this cool? I'm going to have lots of pictures put on Facebook for you, And they go, Facebook, what's that? And we have these little picnics with these kinds of conversations. When you enter politely like that and you ask permission to enter their pen and you wait for their response and everything, you're just being polite and considerate. They really appreciate that. And these are the first steps of reward training. You go ahead and you allow the minis to come up to you in the confines of the pen. And as the relationship progresses in the smaller pen, like I said, you can put the hat on and everything else like that. And when they're calm about you touching them and putting hats on their head and everything, then you can start reaching forward and you're stroking them on their neck and you work their way down the shoulder and down the front legs. Then when you get kind of onto the cannon bone and the fetlock, where the joints are there, actually right behind the knee is a good place to start. You just start squeeze release pressure on it and go, let me have that leg. Would you like to shake hands? And if they get all stiff, then you go, okay, don't have to do that. Then you just go to the other side and work your way down the other side like that. And you go, well, will you give me this one? And you try it again. And because you've pulled on the other one, they go, oh, she's trying something here. She wants me to do something. What you're actually doing is you're getting ready for the farrier. You're getting their front legs handled so that when the farrier comes, you got something to work with. You go ahead and you do it on the other side. And it's my experience that once you've done it on the one side and they got stiff and you let go, then they realize that you're not going to force it, but they didn't get the oats for doing that either. Then when you slide down the other side and you kind of pull on their knee a little bit and work your way down the cannon bone and ask them to pull it forward, they'll keep their legs stiff, but they might let you have it a little bit. They'll take it off the ground and let you have it.
Okay.
And you go, oh, good, that's cool, I like that. And you give them some oats for that. Then you go back to the other side and you do it again and you go, well, you know what? You don't have to be that stiff when you do it. You know, you can bend this leg at the knee and you can relax a little bit. And you kind of shake it and everything. And then they do relax. And then you just, as soon as they relax, you put it down. And then you give them the oats for it. So you're doing a negotiation here and you're inventing little tiny steps in picking up their feet. And you're not forcing it at all. If they get stiff and they don't want you to take it, then you let go. When they do get calm and do what you want, then you let go. So what they're learning is if there's any tension in their body, or if you're doing what you're asking, you're going to let go. And then they're going to get their oats. And you just build it up slowly like that. And pretty soon you'll find they're going ahead and raising their leg and bending it at the knee. They're letting the cannon bone drop loosely, and they're loosing the fetlock, and they're actually shaking hands with you. And you go, oh, that's super cool. And then you introduce your brush. But you don't introduce big brush. You bring that plastic hairbrush with you.
Ah.
And you use that on their neck, whereas the first place they're going to let you touch, and you use it on the neck. And then you've done it on the shoulder. Then you've touched them with your hand on the forehead first before going down the cheeks. So that's what you do with the brush. And they really like it when you scratch them on the forehead with that brush, that plastic human hairbrush. They like that. That's how you work your way around with the brush. And then eventually go down the legs with the brush, so they learn to have something that isn't as soft as your hand on the brush. And that's prerequisite for trimming their legs with clippers if you ever show them. It makes them even more desensitized to a different kind of touch on their legs, because the farrier is going to have a different touch, and he's going to have tools that they got to get used to. So they got to get used to having tools around their bodies. And this is the way that you kind of work into this kind of stuff. When the farrier actually comes, then you go ahead, and they're already comfortable with you coming into their pen, so that's where you start. You don't start at the workstation. You start there, and you have the farrier come into the pen, and you have him sit down next to you. And you sit right next to them and do your thing. And then you hand off the leg to the farrier that's sitting right next to you, slide your butt to the front of the animal and have the farrier slide in front of you. And you just, as long as they're not fighting with him, as long as they accept his holding their front foot, you go ahead and give them the oats reward and talk to them and scratch their forehead and all that stuff while he does the trim. You work into this, and the same thing happens with the back legs. While you're in the pen by yourself on these little things, and when they're really calm with their front legs, then you can work your way down their body. You just slide your body on your butt down the side, and you just keep petting them over their withers and across their back, over their hips and down the back legs. And if they start getting tense, you just stop what you're doing, give them a reward for staying calm to that point, and then just sit there and talk to them again and go, well, I'm gonna go down your back leg this time, so don't be surprised.
Oh, boy.
And you keep your talk very nice like that, you know? And then you go ahead and do it, and you just slide your hand maybe down to the hocks only, and then just back off, give them an oats reward for that. Just keep going like that, and then you can slide down a little further. When you are sitting on your butt, get in as close as you can. Don't be afraid of them and get too far away, because if you do that, they think that if you're afraid, they should be afraid.
Oh.
There's something to be afraid of. This is all, vibration stuff.
Okay.
This is all nonverbal communication. It's body language communication. What do you do when you want to soothe another person? You hug them, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You don't stand off and go, "It's all right." They're looking at you going,
Yeah.
"Well, if it's all right, why won't you get anywhere near me?"
Trust me. It's okay.
Yeah, trust me. Well, how can I trust you and you don't even trust me? It's that kind of thing. So when you stay in close to your mini, what's going to happen is he's going to relax because he will feel that you're relaxed. It also gives you the parameters that you need to extend your arm. If you're on his left side, you've got your left hand up over his body, and you're taking your right hand and going down the leg. When you're close inside by the flanks and everything, it will give you enough length in your arm to go all the way to the bottom of the leg without stretching. If you have to stretch, it's going to make you tense. And he's going to feel that. If he doesn't like what you're doing, what he's going to do, he's not going to kick you. Uh-oh. He's going to try to get away from you. And if you're in tight and he's not tied up too tight, if he's got a reasonable amount of slack on his lead rope, and you start out without the halter, without the lead rope in doing this, but you work your way into putting the halter on the same way. You do the brush, then all of a sudden the halter's there. Then you don't put it on, you leave it there, he gets used to it hanging on your arm, and then one day you just put it on. Then you've got a lead rope on it. And then when he's calm about that, then you can take him out into his turnout pen or pasture, because he can have limited time as long as you're there, because it's not going to be a long time, and do the same things in the open area that you did in the confined area in the same order. And so you're just repeating the same routine over and over again, and it's non-invasive. And so as long as you stay close, it's fine. Of course, you have to have him tied up when the farrier's there. So you do introduce him to the workstation, you do tie him up with slack, and you do the introduction that I told you about, and you and the farrier both stay close in, but he's got room to move away from you if he wants to. So you give him that out. A lot of people are a little bit worried that they're going to jump on you or something like that, or strike at you or bite you. They're only going to do those things because they're defending themselves. Those are defensive behaviors. They're not aggressive behaviors. You've got to understand that. He's just protecting himself. So that if you give him the leeway to protect himself, chances are he's not going to feel like he has to move into you to do anything. You're giving him plenty of space to get away if he wants to. You don't have to worry about it, and it's my experience that none of these animals, I've been on my knees in front of Roll, who was 18 hands.
Oh, wow.
But I did the same kind of approach with him during grooming, during the introduction of the halter, even though he was fully broke to drive and everything and had been handled. He had never been handled politely. When I did that, then I wasn't afraid of him, and he wasn't afraid of me. And I could get on my knees in front of him and ask him to put his head down to receive the oats from my fanny pack. And I could grab him behind the pole on his halter, grab both sides of it, and ask him to pick me up. I'm getting old. I can't get up by myself. Will you help me, please?
Wow.
And then when I had the two minis, Augie and Spuds, the mini-Donkeys, got them used to things the same way. When I got Augie and Spuds to come to me in the pen, that was really bad, because here I was in the middle of the pen and no fence to hang on to get up. And I'm getting at an age where getting up is not easy. My knees don't want to get me back up again. And so here I am sitting in the middle of the pen, and I needed a way to get up. So Augie and Spuds would come over to me, and of course I would do all of these desensitization kinds of things politely with them. And they both learned to pick up the back legs and give them to me too. And I would shake the back legs the same way I would shake the front legs. Oh, shake hands with the back legs now, and isn't this fun?
What a hoot.
And then, I even took it to bathing. I got very wet when I was bathing them on my knees.
Oh.
But they liked that position because it was non-aggressive. Then when I was using the hose, I'd go ahead and spray them on the forehead, spray them on the neck first, then on the forehead, then down the front legs, across the back, over the back legs. And every time I got to a leg, I would pick it up and spray the hose over each individual leg. So it was still done exactly the same way. But here I am in the middle of the pen, sitting on my butt, and I have to get back up. So I taught those two boys. I said, Spuds, you need to come over here on the right, and Augie, you need to come over here on the left. And I did that by offering the oats first on one side to one of them, on the other side to the other one, and then I put my hands on their withers and let them help me get up. So they learned to do that. Anytime, wherever I was, whether I was in the pasture and we were doing some desensitization, or if I was in the tack barn at their workstation and I had finished grooming them, I even vacuumed them that way in the same order. They learned it was non-aggressive, and when I was ready to get up, they were in a line, and Augie and Spuds would move in close on both sides of me and let me hold on to their withers and hike myself up. You're actually teaching really good behaviors, but you're doing it in a way that they totally understand, and they don't feel like they have to get aggressive with you at all. So you don't get this striking. You don't get pulling back on the lead rope. You don't get biting or anything like that. You just have this same way of approaching everything in all these different places where you do these things. I also think it's really good to do group lessons on these things. I mean, a lot of people will think that, oh, man, this one's just giving me so much trouble by himself. I have to make sure that his attention is on me and not on the other buddies, because if it's on his buddies, he's not going to pay attention to me, and he's going to start all of this stuff. They isolate them from their friends. And I don't think isolating anybody from their friends is a very good way to do it. I think, in my estimation, it would be more beneficial to see if the friends want to participate and ask them if they want to do that.
Right.
And so that was my approach with them, and that's why a lot of times I did these halter training lessons before anybody's had a halter on, and I just put them all in the same pen with me. And I invite them all to come up to me, and then the ones that are a little more bold, I would introduce the halter to. If one comes up and I pick up the halter that's laying next to me on the ground and they bolt away, then I just put it back on the ground, and I don't try to do it with that one. I do it with the other ones. And when I do, I go, see how brave Augie is, Spuds? Do you want to be that brave? And you know what? It works.
Oh, yeah.
Spuds comes tiptoeing up and goes, well, maybe I want to be that strong and that brave, and shall we try it then, and people think I'm absolutely out of my mind when I do this kind of stuff, because I'm talking funny, but, I'm talking their language too.
Oh, sure.
If you've ever listened to the tones of their brays, they talk to you, and a lot of times it's kind of a soft, kind of thing. And that means, yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. And when they go, ah! It's like, you're not paying attention to me.
Oh, this is too funny.
So you're learning a language here. And if you want to learn the language, then you've got to break everything down into the tiniest steps so they have the opportunity to teach you their side of it. And you need to listen. And they don't ask much from us. They ask for the reward. And the oats are just great. They just think that is totally cool. And when your farrier's there, you got to tell him, no, you can't just sit here and do your job. You got to talk to him too.
Right.
And my farrier says, do I have to talk the same way you do? I said, it would be better if you did. And my farrier is a very strong man, and he is very comfortable in himself. So here's this big guy, you know, with a deeper voice going, hey, would you like to go ahead and lift your foot for me? And then when they do, he's in shock, but he knows it works. So he's like, that's good. You know, that's a good thing. The other thing is that we want to avoid any forceful behaviors because any forceful ones are going to be met with defensive behaviors. So if he needs to move over, if the mini's getting too close and he's eyeing the fanny pack and he's running into the farrier, then you just give a little poke with your finger on his shoulder and you tell him, move over, and you use a push-release movement, not a steady push. These long ears will move into pressure.
Right.
I've known a lot of people that have been pinned up against the wall because they tried to take two hands and push the long ears away from them. That's an invitation for them to move right into you, you know, and so if you don't want to get pinned, you don't do that. And I learned the hard way. I learned with a Molly mule that was in heat, and boy, was she in heat. And she really loved me. So when I went in her stall, she moved into me when I tried to move her hindquarters away from me, and she pinned me in the corner, and she peed on me.
Oh.
Yeah, not fun. Not fun, but that was a really good lesson. Don't push steady on these long ears. Don't do it.
Right.
You know, just do the push release, and preferably with the point of your index finger, or if you need to, because it's a little stronger, you can use your thumb. But no steady pressure here. They will move over, and then you can give them their oats, and they go, well, that's what I wanted anyway, so that's good.
You just couldn't read their mind.
No, I couldn't. I was learning by taking these smaller steps. I started realizing that it didn't really take much to communicate with them at all. Then once they were leading in the smaller pen, then I could get them to the workstation. So I did that, and I could lead them around the pasture. So I did that. And I led them in all kinds of weather. I led them in the wind. I led them when it was super hot and super cold and snow on the ground, snowing, all these different weather things, and then taught them how to stay calm during all of it. When your mini pulls back on the lead rope, don't force it. Again, don't force it. Just keep the lead rope taut and remind them that you have a fanny pack around your waist that they really want. And what's in it is really good. So if they come to you, then you just keep it taut. And when they walk up to you, or even if they just give you slack in the rope, then you just walk forward and you give them their reward. Stand there and wait patiently while they go ahead and chew it up. This comes in really handy when you're teaching them how to do obstacles. And you need to do your obstacles in a confined area first. You don't take minis for walks that have not become calm with you. Oh. It could be a disaster.
Yeah.
Now, Frances was she's my little mini that looks like a deer, and she's a mini mule, and she's absolutely adorable. And I bought her originally as a partner because she kind of matched my miniature horse a little bit, and I wanted them to be a driving pair, but I soon learned that neither one of them was going to be very good by themselves, they were kind of manageable by themselves. Frances probably not at all. When she figured out what I was going to do with her, she decided that wasn't for her. The miniature horse was like, oh, well, I'll do it, but I hate it. And if I don't want to go somewhere, I'm going to lock up and you're not going to be able to make me move. That was single hitch. I got that far with them. I didn't get that far with Frances, though. I was warned when I bought Frances that she was kind of abused. She was 7 years old. She'd been forced to drive in a cart with brakes, and the guy manhandled her, and she did not like it. She would do what he said, but he was like 400 pounds, and she couldn't do anything against him. Well, I'm not 400 pounds, and I can't make her do anything that she doesn't want to do. So Frances, she let me know in no uncertain terms that she was not going to drive. Tried lunging her in the elbow pull. She went right through it. Bouncing, bucking, and carrying on with the mini madness. The mini mania is what I call it. And that's their way of saying, no way, Jose.
Wow.
I've learned to listen.
Okay.
So I decided that Frances didn't need to learn how to drive, especially when Mirage didn't want to do it either. I just thought, well, those two can be buddies, and they can be a pair, and they can like each other and turn out. And as it turned out, it's a good thing that I made that decision, because Mirage has gone blind. And Mirage now follows Frances in turnout, and she leads him around by the nose, and they're both very happy. Everybody thinks they're just wonderful to see, because he looks like a magical pony. He's a miniature horse with a full mane and tail, and right now he looks like one of those horses from the Academy series, the fat pony that's all hairy.
Oh, yeah.
And just adorable, And Frances is just beautiful. Getting back to what I was saying on the leading thing, you've got to learn to negotiate with them. And Raj has always been really good at leading, but I found that it's often very good. And with Spuds and Augie was the same thing, is they're much more apt to lead nicely when you lead them in pairs. When they have their friend along, they're going to be much more willing to comply with you. And if you've got one that's stubborn and one that's willing, in the case of Spuds and Augie, Augie was willing, Spuds was not always. However, oddly enough, when we got into the obstacles, it was kind of funny because Spuds was more willing to do some obstacles before Augie would do them. And Augie would do some before Spuds would do them. So you just determine who will do it more easily, and you do it with that one first. When you're doing obstacles, they're used to hanging with you by this time. They've led through the hourglass pattern with all of the lessons that are learned in there, and they've had their elbow pull on loosely for that, so they're used to, not being able to raise their head and run off and that kind of stuff.
Good point.
Oh, yeah. So you kind of determine who's the brave one in what situation and be willing to go with it. In the case of Mirage and Frances, Mirage was a horse, so he could be bullied. Frances, sometimes she would let me lead her, and she would go over all the obstacles and everything, and very nicely and everything. Then she got kind of bullish and decided she didn't always want to go for a walk by herself. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll take her with Mirage. Well, she would go down the road with me very nicely for a few months, and then all of a sudden she was like, I want to walk by myself. And she would jerk that lead rope right out of my hand. And I would just go, okay, well, me and Mirage are going for a walk. You can do what you want. And she would drop in right behind Mirage, and she would come along with us. So I finally got to the point where I realized that pulling on the lead rope was only going to translate into a fight. So I got to the point when I went to the stall and everything, I didn't even put her halter on. I just grabbed Mirage, opened her door, and said, come on, we're going for a walk. And we would go ahead and walk down the road into the hayfield and around the hayfield. And Frances, being the mini mule and the wild and woolly thing that she was, would go out there and gallop circles, bucking, kicking, and then come back. you know. But one time I missed a step.
Uh-oh.
When I was leading Mirage, I was so busy watching Francis that I let Mirage's lead rope get a little too slack. And Francis saw it, and she came running up behind us, went right between me and Mirage and freed him from me and took him out bucking and kicking in the hayfield. And there I was standing there going, well, crap. Now I've lost them both.
There you go.
But I told Mirage, I said, Mirage, whoa. Well, being the horse and not wanting to make the mama mad and being very submissive, he stopped.
Oh.
And Frances looked at him and she goes, what are you doing? She's walking towards you. She's going to get you again. And he didn't go anywhere. He just stood there. So I went up to him, and I got his lead rope. Only this time I kept his head right up against my hip so Frances couldn't run between us again. And we managed to make it all the way home. She taught me a lesson. When you're taking us out, you need to stay close to Mirage. We will go on the walk. I will follow you, and everything will go well. Just don't put any space between you because I'm going to go right through it. If you have something, like I wanted to get them used to water too, and we've got irrigation ditches out here. With Spuds and Augie, we went out there for the irrigation ditch. Spuds just locked up. So I just dropped his lead rope right there and took Augie and Augie was balking too. But I went ahead and jumped the ditch and got on the other side and got on the very end of his lead rope and just held it taut and said, come on, Augie, you can do this. And I waited. And eventually he went through the ditch. And I said, Spuds, you can do this. Now, this is where sometimes you have an opportunity, and I learned this in the obstacles, that you can get down to their level to give them more confidence. And I did this with Spuds, with the tires, with the bridge, with the tractor tire. And so when we got to the water, I got on the end of his lead rope on the other side, but instead of standing up like I did with Augie, I got down on my knees and sat on my butt and just held the rope taut and waited for him to wade across. And he eventually did. This is the kind of approach that you do. And I talked about the tractor tire here now, too. You do the same thing. You know, they're going to want to go around it. They're not going to want to step in the middle of it. But if you sit on one side of it, and then they go one side and you pull them back to middle. They go the other way, you pull them back to middle. And you just keep the rope tight, but you don't pull on it. And if they sit back on it a little bit, you let them go ahead and have the slack. But as they're pulling back, keep one hand on the rope and one hand on the zipper of the fanny pack and just open it up when they start going backwards and start playing with the oats, and then the attention is no longer on going backwards. It's on, what are you doing? What are you doing there? Oh, did you see something here you want? Remember, I want you to put your foot in this tire. And then they come up to the edge of it, and then you're holding the rope with the left hand, and you reach forward. Now, you've taught them to shake, right? So you lean forward and you go, let's shake hands. And you pull up the front foot, which they yield because they've done it 100 times. And you just kind of pull it over the edge of the tractor tire and you set it on the ground on the other side. And then, of course, they pull it back. And you go, oh, I guess you don't want these. And then you put your hand in the fanny pack and you show them the oats again. And then you give a little tug on the lead rope. And then now they're going, oh, this is connected, isn't it? And then you pick up the front leg again, you put it in the hole of the tire, and you give a little tug on the lead rope. This time they leave it there. They don't walk into it, but they leave it there. So then you can give them some oats for leaving it there. And then once they'll leave it there, then you can do the same thing to the other leg. And then they got two legs in there. And then The next move is to go ahead, once they got the 2 legs in there and they're standing there chewing their oats, and they get the 2 legs in there, you give them the us, and now they want more. You go, well, if you want some more, you have to come over here to me, where the fanny pack is. That means you got to get your shoulders into this tire. You just coax them in like that. You give them their reward. Then you stand up and you back out of the tire and you ask them to jump out of the tire just by going through. And you break that tire down like that. You break every obstacle down with those tiny little steps.
Right.
The smallest of steps. And any time you can get down to their level, do it. With the understanding, they don't want to step on you. They don't want to run into you. They're just going to try to avoid the obstacle. So if they bolt, it's going to be sideways one way or the other, or they're going to go backwards. But they're not going to do anything to you because you've taught them their good manners. After they've done obstacles and everything, the next thing is to teach them to lunge. This is a great thing for mini mules and mini horses because they like speeding around and going really fast. You know, so all you got to do is just make sure that they're doing it in good posture. So you rig them up in their elbow pole, their snaffle bit, and their surcingle, or a small saddle. I had special surcingles made for my minis. Rigged them up in those. Did the mini mules. I had 2 mini mules and a miniature horse at first, and I did them together, and they did really well. And they learned to walk, trot, canter, and the elbow pull kept them in good posture. So they built up their core muscles, and they started moving really well. And then I wanted to do the same thing with the donkeys. I knew donkeys were different.
Oh, yeah.
But being small and different posed some real issues because Augie and Spuds, if I put them in a round pen and tried to lunge them in their lunging flows, the minute I walked away, they just stood still. It wouldn't do anything. So I thought, well, shoot, what am I going to do? Chase these guys around the round pen with a stick all the time? No. I thought, the other guys can help me. So I took the 2 mini mules and the miniature horse and the 2 mini donkeys, and I put them in together. Well, Mirage, the miniature horse, and Spuds, the miniature donkey, did not like each other. So they went to chasing each other and kicking each other, which kept them all going around in a circle, and it worked out just beautifully. And so I finally got all 5 of them to lunge together. And then pretty soon I could take Augie and Spuds in and lunge them by themselves. And then when I did the same group lessons with Wrangler and Chastity, who are much bigger, they're large standards, I could actually include Augie and Spuds, but I couldn't include Augie and Spuds when Wrangler was in the round pen because he would chase them.
Oh.
Donkeys like to chase anything that is smaller than and weaker than them,
Okay.
including smaller ones of them. I learned that lesson too. But Chastity enjoyed having them with her, and she got a little bit bulky on lunging too. So Wrangler helped her not be so bulky, and when she wasn't lunging with Wrangler, she could lunge with Augie and Spuds. And so that was good. And once they learned how to lunge, then I went ahead and put each of them, started them out because I wanted to drive them. Ground driving was next on the list. For Augie and Spuds, I didn't want to put the harness bridles on them right away. So I left their halters on them. And they were used to the harness bridles because they had lunged in them, but I didn't want to start tugging on them with lines. So I just left them in their halters, and I did each one of them on their halter with the lead rope and my dressage whip, and I just started putting them out in front of me in the round pen. I would take them to the rail and walk behind them, and if they balked, then I'd just make them keep going forward. If they tried to turn, then I'd step forward onto that side and drive them into the fence. And so they got used to me being behind them and tapping them on their butt with a whip to go forward. That was the first order of business. I did each one of them independently. So they would learn those 2 cues to go forward, to get tapped on the whip. Well, I guess 3, stay going forward and don't turn unless I tell you to. And then I wanted them to be a team. I took a short rope with snaps on both sides and snapped their halters together. And then I did the same thing with the whip and driving them both around the perimeter. And then I started doing S-turns through the middle and everything and just changing sides because I didn't have any lines. And then the next step was to put the lines on them and do that. But before I did that, I put the harness bridles on. But I wanted to make sure the equipment was going to fit well for the vehicle, too. So I brought the cart, the marathon cart, into the tack barn, and I fitted all of their harness before I even got to a point where I was going to hitch them up. I made sure everything fit and everything was adjusted correctly. And then I just took them back to the round pen in their sure singles and their harness bridles, and I left the halters on and attached that rope that tied them together to the halters, never to the harness bridles. When I actually got into ground driving them in their harness bridles with their harness, I attached the tie to the collars, not to the bridles.
Okay.
And so they were held together as a team. But everything that I did with them, including their ground driving, once I got the harness bridles on, then I went ahead and did each of them individually, walking behind them, doing it the same way we did in the halters, around the perimeter, turning S-turns through the middle, and this time putting the pressure on the lines so they feel it at their mouth. And I was trying to walk in sync with their back legs. But do you know what tiny little steps they take?
Oh, yeah.
It's not like walking behind your saddle mule. I'll give you that, you know. And doing tiptoe, tiptoe, tiptoe can get really tiring. So I would try to stay in sync with them, but I got to the point where I was going, well, if I can be in sync with them every 3 steps, that's good enough. And they thought it was good enough, too. So that worked. That worked okay. And so once we got through with all of that in the round pen, then we were able to go and ground drive in the hourglass pattern out in the open, and then ground drive the obstacles. And when we went to an obstacle that they didn't like to do because I was behind them, I would just stop them, reward them for stopping, lay the lines on their back, and then I would go ahead, give them their reward, and lead them over the obstacle, and then go back again and drive them over the obstacle. That just gave them the confidence to let them know that they could do that, and that's how I approached the obstacles with the ground driving. And I did all the walk-through obstacles first, and then eventually I worked my way into the obstacles with lateral introduced. And, of course, the tire was one of them. They had been introduced to the tractor tire on the lead rope alone with nothing else on it, no ground driving or anything. What I had done was I led them through first, and once I got them to put the shoulders in there, then I'd pat their little rear ends so they'd do a turn on the forehand, and then I would get them so they would leave the back legs in and have the front legs out front, and I would actually crawl along on my knees and move the front end over and around the tire, and they thought that was just great. Oh, she's in submission. How cool is that?
Oh, boy.
So they weren't paying attention to what they were doing, but they were doing a turn on the haunches. You know, they were more concerned that I was in submission. So,
oh, that's funny.
Yeah, this body language with minis is extremely, extremely important. What I have found is the ground driving gives them the confidence to take the lead, where you've been in the lead all along, and it's been a negotiation all along, but you have learned how to break things down into these tiny, tiny steps that they need to assure them that they can trust you. that you're not going to force them to do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing to know about dealing with minis, to make sure that when you're going out to do a mini lesson, that you don't have anything to do later and don't even think about getting in a hurry about it.
Oh, yeah.
Leave yourself the entire day to do the lesson if necessary. That doesn't mean you should use the whole day, because you actually shouldn't.
Right.
30, 40-minute lessons max.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes true for all the different sizes, all the different breeds. When you drill them, they get sour.
Right.
And they don't learn anything. They just get tired.
Right.
You know, and they get tired of you. Your goal should always be to have a good time with your companion, and then things will go smoothly. The next section that we're going to address here in part 2 is all about hitching up to a vehicle, and it's so important to take this kind of time to do your groundwork, even with your full-sized animals, because with mules, if they ever run off with a vehicle behind them, they aren't likely to want to ever be driven again.
Oh, yeah.
And the chances of them running off again are really high once they've done it once.
Sure.
All this prep work is really important, and it's really important that you pay attention to the smaller steps. You learn to negotiate, not force things. With these minis, they're just explosive little bombs running around on legs. So...
I'm sorry, but that's funny.
It takes nothing to trigger them. You do well to just slow it all down and spend the time doing this. And if you do, you're going to make them healthier, because you are developing core muscles and belt muscle while you're doing all this. And they're going to live longer, and they're going to like everything that they do, because they're going to like you.
Oh, yeah.
I bought a mini mule to test this theory on and my program on when he was 20 years old, to see what kind of an effect it would have on an older animal that was now in decline because of age. Now, we've heard that mules and donkeys live longer than horses do, and they do, but not when they're not treated well, when they're not maintained well.
Yeah.
You know, no, they're not going to live any longer than horses do. But this mini mule that I bought was Lucky 3 Franklin, and I bought him out at Bishop from John and Stephanie Newton, who had used him in parades and everything and driving classes, and he was a really good guy, but he was a mini, and when he got a hair up his butt, he went ahead and did things his way. I had him in the outdoor arena, and I made a sore mistake. I did not pick up the ground rails, and he thought it would be fun to take the cart right over the ground rails.
Oops.
So he did. Bump, 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 right over those ground rails. Lucky for me, I stayed in, but I caught him looking over his shoulder with a little sneer on his face. Like, ha-ha, did you like that, Franklin? That wasn't very nice. Franklin, he was also the guy that helped me train Mirage to pull the marathon cart, and that's when I found out that Mirage was going to be dangerous in harness with a partner, because Franklin was really rock solid. He was really cool. So when I introduced Mirage to the team thing on the marathon cart, Franklin stood there very quietly, and I put the harness on Mirage, and then he just blew up right there in harness. Uh-oh. And he couldn't go anywhere. I had an assistant with me, and the brakes were set on the marathon cart. So Mirage just went upside down, backwards, and all through the whole thing. Couldn't even get his harness off because I had it adjusted right.
Yeah.
And he finally ran out of breath and decided to stand still. Meanwhile, Franklin is looking over his shoulder at Mirage going, do you really have to behave like this? And of course, Franklin looks at me and he goes, yeah, I know. You can't end the lesson till he's done what you wanted him to do, right? Mm-hmm. And I nodded my head at Franklin. Steve took Franklin's lead rope, and I took Mirage's lead rope, and we led them around the outdoor arena and made them do one loop before we quit. but I never hooked up Mirage again.
Oh.
I got the message.
Meredith, is there a book or some articles as a follow-up to what we talked about today?
Actually, all of my books address all of this basic training.
Okay.
Whether it's going to be for minis or mid-size or draft, the feeding, maintenance, and grooming and the prep work for core strength is all exactly the same.
Okay.
There will need to be adjustments done in harness, for instance, on the minis. I have not yet found a noseband that is small enough to put on the harness bridles on the miniatures. Find that a dog collar works just fine.
Oh,
You just get a little strap to attach it to the harness noseband, and it works just fine to close your mouth on the bit.
Mm-hmm.
Use the same kind of bits. You got somebody that's strong, and you use a Liverpool or a half-cheek snaffle for driving, and that's what you want them to be in, since these smaller ones are not going to be ridden, they're going to be driven, so you just start them in those bits. In all my books, Training Mules and Donkeys, Logical Approach, there's a chapter on driving and everything in there. There's all kinds of stuff about prep work and what you need to do to build that relationship of trust between you. I've got my video series, tapes 1 through 10, and tapes 1 and 2 are all the prep work that you do before it splits off into tapes 3 and 4, and 3 goes to driving, which is suitable for the minis. But you can skip to tape 7 if you're going to do jumping on the lead rope with your minis, because there are a lot of points that I cover in tape 7 that have to do with jumping. And there are things that you should know about jumping, like measuring the stride to the jump so that the animal is getting to the jump with the hindquarters in the right place to launch themselves over the jump. The manuals, Training Without Resistance, and Equine Management and Donkey Training all correspond with the videotapes. Part 1 and 2 are chapters 1 and 2 in those manuals. Chapter 3 is on driving. Chapter 7 is on jumping. All of this prep work and core strength work is mentioned in Equus Revisited. So all of my books and videos complement each other, and they overlap in some places, but they don't duplicate each other.
Right.
There's a lot to learn. When you start thinking about breaking these things down to these small steps and learning a language between you, that means you learning their body language, them using your body language, and what steps it takes for that to be recognized. There's a lot of information. Even something as simple as grooming and maintenance seems simple, really isn't that simple. If you want their trust, they got to think you care about them. That means you got to brush them right. You have to respect their safe space.
That is the correct answer.
You can only go in that when you're invited. You can't barge your way in.
Right. Right.
And those things. So you learn good manners with each other too. And it will just take you miles on training. And training will happen a lot more easily. That's why I say that my training approach, even the most non-equine person can learn to train an equine with my program, because the steps are so small and it brings both of you in together, and you are never overwhelmed. And if you feel like you're getting overwhelmed, you just back up a step. That just means you're just not done with that step yet. So, yeah.
This is awesome. I cannot wait for part 2. Let's go to lunch.
If you'd like to be a sponsor, send me an email.
everycowgirlsdream@gmail.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.